Hello and welcome. This is Computer Science for jss1 third term week 5 lesson. I'm Kwasi Barida. Today we're going to be treating the topic fundamental computer operation, and by the end of this lesson you should be able to define booting, put on a computer, and shut down a computer correctly. So let us get started. What is booting? Booting is defined as the process of starting the computer by loading the fundamental elements, that's talking about the operating system, into the main memory, that's the RAM. This is initiated by pressing the power button. So for booting to take place, you have to press the power button on the system. So when you press the power button on the system, what happens is that the fundamental elements, that's the operating system, is being loaded into the main memory, that's the RAM. Remember, in the previous lesson we talked about the main memory. We talked about the RAM, that's an acronym for random access memory, and we talked about the ROM, an acronym for read-only memory. So we talked extensively about the main memory there. So to get more information, you can refer to the previous video. During the boot process, the computer goes through multiple steps to ensure the computer hardware works correctly and the necessary software can be loaded. So when the computer is booting, aside from the operating system being loaded into the main memory, other activities that takes place is that the computer checks the hardwares, checking the all the components attached to the computer to be sure that they are in a good working condition. They can work in sync with the operating system for it to be able to do for it to be able to carry out all the tasks you need to carry out in the computer. So that's part of what the booting process does. It loads the operating system into the main memory, and also it checks the hardwares of the computer to make sure they are working properly and all the necessary software that you need to work with your computer. So there are two types of booting, and they are the cold booting and the warm booting. So before go to explaining the types of booting, let's see a screenshot or a picture of a computer boot screen. So that's what it looks like when the computer is booting. You see something like this, although in modern systems you don't necessarily see this again. Just put it on, just observe the rotating, the spinning, depending on the operating system you're working with. Or if you're working with a Windows operating system, the modern one, the newer versions, you don't see this screen again. All you observe is that you see welcome, and you see a kind of loading process. So that loading process, all of these now, they are taking place. The files that are being loaded, all of the hardware, they are being checked to be sure that they are in a good working condition. So all of those takes place for the system to come on, for it to make use of it. So now let's go to the types of booting. Let's look at the first one, the cold booting. What's cold booting? This involves putting on the computer after it was completely shut down or turned off from a powerless state. This is done by pressing the power button on the system unit. So let's look at this again. It says the cold booting involves putting on the computer after it was completely shut down or turned off or from powerless state. That means when the computer was completely off, it was not on, you just brought up your computer and you want to make use of it, pressing the power button, that process it takes for the computer to come on, that particular booting is called a cold booting. It's called a cold booting, and this is because the computer was completely shut down. It was not running, nothing was running. So when you put it on from then, that's process, or the process it takes the computer to come on then, is called cold booting. This is done by pressing the power button on the system unit or on the computer. The computer will then go through the complete cycle of posts, and post is an acronym for power on self tests. So the power on self tests is the process of checking all the hardwares to make sure that they are in a good working condition. Post is internal check of the computer. Post is the internal check the computer undergoes to ensure that the memory and various output devices are functioning properly. So it checks all of the hardwares, all of the devices attached to the computer, to make sure that they're in a good working condition. So that's one of what you observe. That's one of the things that takes place when you could boot a computer. That means you put on the computer from a powerless state. When it was completely shut down, it goes through the post cycle. So next is the warm booting. So what's the warm booting? The warm booting involves restarting or resetting a computer that is already on. It allows the system to reload the operating system files. So now, for the warm booting, the computer is on, it's running. Unlike the cold booting, remember for the cold booting, you said the computer is completely off, it's shut down. So you put it on, that's the cold booting. Then the warm booting, your computer is already on. But you want to restart it again. Maybe the system is acting slow, or maybe it freezes, or it's frozen. So all you need to do for you to get your system running properly, or you want to get the system functioning better than it's functioning, then all you need to do is to restart. So for you to restart, there are two ways of doing it. There's a reset button, that's for the desktop computer. I have a reset button on the system unit, so you just press the reset button, then the system restarts. So that process is the warm booting. Then the process it takes when the computer is completely turned off, that is the cold booting. Warm booting can be done by pressing the reset button or Ctrl plus Alt plus Delete all together on the keyboard. If you look at your keyboard, you're going to see these keys. You have the Ctrl key, you have the Alt key, and the Delete key. So to warm boot the system, you press these three keys at once. You hold them down together. So if you hold these three keys down together, it's going to bring up a dialog box where you choose the option of restarting the computer. So when you restart the computer that way, when the computer was already on, then you're warm booting the computer. And in warm booting, there is no power on self tests, that's the posts. So remember, for cold booting, the computer checks all of the hardwares, checks all of the components of the computer to make sure that they're in a good working condition. While in a warm booting, already they are working, they are functioning. So the only thing that is loaded again is the operating system for warm booting. So take notes, for cold booting, the post processes, the post cycle takes place, and the operating system is being loaded to the RAM, that's to the main memory. While in the warm booting, the post does not take place. It's only the operating system, that's the operating system in the RAM is completely wiped out, and it's reloaded into the RAM again to have a fresh start. So that's the warm booting. So next, let's warm booting is used or done when the system is not responding or when it freezes. So that's when you do the warm booting. Don't just do the warm booting because you want to do the warm booting. If the system is on and it's acting slow, maybe the memory is low, so much is on the main memory of the system, so you want to clear it up and get a fresh start. So you do a warm boot. Or if the system is freezing, that means you have a screen showing, maybe you're trying to do something and it's freezing and you're not comfortable with it, so you do a warm boot. So those are the times to do the warm booting. So next, let's see the steps involved in putting on a computer. So to put on the computer, the first thing you need to do is to connect the computer properly. So this is for the desktop computer. For desktop computer, and make sure all of the parts are well connected to their right ports on the system units. The monitor is properly connected, the keyboard is connected, the mouse is connected, and every other device, either output or input device that you need to work with on the system is properly connected. Then the next thing you're going to do, haven't done that, is to turn on the main power supply switch. That means on the wall you turn on the power supply switch. So after turning on the power supply switch, you turn on the surge protector, the stabilizer, or the UPS. You're going to need this to protect your system so it does not get affected by unstable current or unstable voltage. So you need your surge protector, your stabilizer, or the UPS. UPS does more than that. It actually allows your system to, if you're using a desktop computer that does not have a battery inside of it that keeps it on after there is no external power supply, you need UPS. So as you're working on the computer, should there be power failure or power loss, the UPS keeps your system running for some time so you can properly shut down the computer. So you need it. Then, so that's the next thing you're going to do. You switch on the power surge, the surge protector, the stabilizer, or the UPS. And the next thing is to turn on the printer, the monitor switches or button. So you have a printer connected to the system units, you have a monitor connected to system units. You power them on either by using the switch or the buttons, whatever of them. So you do that, you power on the monitor or the printer as the next. Then the next thing you're going to do is to switch on the system units. So you understand that the system unit is like the main part of the desktop computer. That's where virtually all of the things that makes up the computer, all of the things that makes up the computer is everything that makes up the computer, or most of the things that makes up the computer rather, is inside of the system units, like the memory, the UPS, the power pack. All of those, they are inside the system unit. So you switch on the system unit by pressing the power button. So when you do this, the computer goes through the booting process. And mind you, if the computer doing this now, that means the computer was on. So this particular button is going to be the cold button. So when you do this, the computer comes on and it loads for you to be able to use it to carry out whatever task you want to do with it. So that's how you put on a computer. And next, shutting down a computer. What does it mean to shut down a computer? Shutting down a computer refers to the steps taken to safely turn off the computer after making use of it. Remember, it says steps. That means it's not just one thing you do. Although on the system unit you have a power button. The power button is mainly for you to power on the computer. It's mainly for you to put on the computer. The power button is not for you to turn off or switch off the computer. Take note of that. So if you want to turn off the computer, you don't use the power button. That's for the desktop computer, and also for the other kind of computer too, like your laptop, your palm top. You don't use the power button by pressing it. You don't use that to turn off the computer. There is a process, there are steps I need to go through to power off or to shut down a computer. So let's go on. As a computer user, it's important that after using the computer, it is properly shut down, following the process, and not just pressing the power button to turn it off. You don't just press the power button to turn it off. There are steps you need to take to properly shut down the computer, so you don't damage the computer. You don't cause harm to the computer. So you need to go through these steps. So what are the steps in shutting down the computer? To shut down the computer, follow the steps below. First, when you want to shut down the computer, that means the computer is already on. So the first thing you're going to do is to close all the open files and programs. You have a computer on, running, you have things you're doing. So before you shut down the computer, you have to close all of the programs, all of the files, everything that you have running on the computer. The one that you have on your taskbar that you have, that you started. So you have to close all of those programs and close all of the files you're working with. And the next thing you're going to do is to click on the start button on the taskbar. The taskbar is the last bar on your Windows, that's on the computer screen. The last bar on the computer screen, that's the taskbar. So on the far left, on the far left of the taskbar, you have a Windows button. So you click on the Windows button. Then the next thing you're going to do is that on the start menu, so the Windows button brings up, the Windows button is also known as the start button. So when you click on it, it brings out the start menu. So on the start menu, the next thing to do is to click on the shut down button. So after clicking on the shut down button, a Windows dialog box appears. So on that Windows dialog box, you select shut down and then you click on OK. So these are the steps you use in shutting down the computer. And you can also, in shutting down the computer, there's a shortcut for it. You can after turning off, after closing all of the open files and all of the programs you have running on the computer, after closing them, the next thing you're going to do is to hold on the Alt key and the F4 key. You hold them simultaneously, you hold them together. So when you hold them together, it's going to bring up the dialog box as a shutdown Windows dialog box. Then from there you can click on the shut down and click on OK. So that also shuts down the computer. So these are the steps you use in shutting down a computer properly, and not by pressing the power button directly. So that is it. Before we leave, let's do a recap of what we've learned today. First, we talked about booting. We said there are two types of booting. First of all, say booting is a process it takes the computer to come on. So that is booting. I would say there are two types of booting: cold booting and the warm booting. And next, we talked about the steps on how to put on a computer. And finally, we talked about the steps on how to shut down a computer correctly. Remember, in shutting down the computer, you don't press the power button directly. What you do is to go through the steps. So in doing that, you keep your computer safe. So that is it for today's lesson. I hope you've learned something. Looking forward to seeing you again in our next class. So until then, thank you very much and God bless you. Bye bye.